late night trade brings Mason Marchment to the Columbus Blue Jackets about 3 seconds before the holiday roster freeze goes into effect. Let's break down exactly what this trade means and is it going to move the needle for the stumbling Columbus Blue Jackets?
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. So I woke up to some news this morning, which is that the Blue Jackets traded a couple of picks for forward Mason Marchment from the Seattle Kraken. Now, my immediate reaction to this was, why? And then I decided to kind of sit with it and do some thinking about it, do some reading into, Mason Marchment as a player, etc. And I still kind of feel like my overwhelming response is, but why? But I don't think that this is... I guess my big problem with this trade, and that's what we'll do, we'll break down the trade, and then we'll talk about Marchment as a player, is I guess the biggest thing I have with this trade is kind of twofold, right? Is it feels like Mason Marchment is a consolation for not getting Kiefer Sherwood, which I'm fine with, because I think I would much rather pay a second and a fourth for Mason Marchment than pay a first-round pick plus for Kiefer Sherwood, And I don't know if that's still at the asking price. I know after all of this trade nonsense went down, he did score a hat trick, or potentially during while all of this was going down. So maybe that brings his value back up. But he'd been on a bit of a cold streak before then. But we're not talking about Kiefer Sherwood. Talking about Mason Marchment. Mason Marchment was really, really good in Dallas and has been kind of flat in Seattle. Now, this is not necessarily an indication of how things are going to go with the Blue Jackets. But I will say that he cost the Seattle Kraken after coming off of his last season with the Dallas Stars. He had 47 points in 62 games. Coming off of that season, the Kraken paid a third and a fourth to acquire him. This season, Mason Marchment has 13 points in 29 games, which is, I think, about a 25-ish% reduction in points, if I'm doing my math correctly. The Blue Jackets paid a second and a fourth for him. So Seattle basically got the picks back that they've traded for him better, Now, the thing about the picks is I don't believe either of them are the Blue Jackets' original picks. So, they kind of are bonus picks. I'm going to pull up the Blue Jackets draft situation right now, just to... Now, the thing about the trade, the picks with this trade is I don't love giving up a second and a fourth for Mason Marchment when Phil Danault just got traded for just a second all on its own. I think that Phil Danault is a much, much more useful player than Mason Marchment, who admittedly his value is low right now, right? But... the picks that the Blue Jackets gave up were the second-round pick that they got from Minnesota in the David Jiricek trade and the fourth-round pick that they got from Jack Roslovic they got from the Rangers in the Jack Roslovic trade. Not last trade deadline, but the trade deadline previous to that. So they didn't give up either of their own picks. I will say that they don't have their 2027 they don't have their own 2027 second round pick because that went to Colorado for the Charlie Coyle trade. So they couldn't give away that pick, but giving away basically bonus picks I think is fine. I don't think it's amazing asset management, but I also think that it's a seller's market right now, and I go back to I'd rather pay this for Mason Marchment than pay the asking price for Kiefer Sherwood, right? I don't think Marchment will be as effective as Kiefer Sherwood. And we'll talk about kind of his effectiveness in a second here. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm looking at like potential trades that could have happened and like moves that they could have made. And the trade itself, I think, is fine. Marchment is a pending UFA. He makes $4.5 million, I think. Yeah, and then is a UFA in the summer. So again, like there is an opportunity for the Blue Jackets to flip him at the deadline if this doesn't work out. I don't know whether you'd get the same cost. It depends on how the rest of the season goes for him. But they managed to pick up an extra roster piece that is not going to, unless they decide to re-sign him, which is also a possibility, but it's not going to hamstring them down the line, right? I'm going to knock on wood when I say that because this team exists to make me look stupid. But overall, I like Mason Marchment as a player. I don't know that he's going to be super effective here. I think he was really, really good in Dallas and was kind of flat in Seattle. But I think there are a couple of reasons for this. I think that Dallas and Seattle play very different systems. I think that he's playing with lower caliber line mates. And when I say lower caliber line mates, I mean he's playing with players that are not having like incredible seasons. So the leading scorer for the Seattle Kraken right now is Jordan Eberle, who has 20 points on the season. So he's playing with Eberle, and he also played with Beniers, I believe. That was the line was, and Beniers has 18 points in 32 games as well. So not a great season that like a lot of Kraken are having. So I think probably like that's not the only reason that his point totals are down. But I think that the Kraken is just a team that doesn't score a ton regardless of who's on the ice. I'm just pulling up his most consistent line mates to double check that I am in fact correct. Yeah, he played 134 minutes, which is the most of any line on the Kraken with Beniers and Eberle. Was basically a net even in terms of expected goals. The line was supposed to score 5.7 and allow 5.5. So, that's fine. And honestly, in their minutes, they scored 5 goals for and 1 against. This is all even strength, I believe. So, it's not a Marchment issue. I think that his numbers are down is kind of the overarching point here. And I think it's mostly that it's no one in the Seattle Kraken seems to want to score goals, and I know that we talk about a lot about the Blue Jackets and how they hate scoring goals right now, but I believe the Blue Jackets have like 4 or 5 guys that have more points than anyone on the Kraken. I'm just pulling up the Blue Jackets stats right now to see if see who's cracked 20 points. So the players that have more points than the leading scorer for the Seattle Kraken: Zach Werenski, Kirill Marchenko, Dmitry Voronkov, Adam Fantilli, and Charlie Coyle. 5 players all have more points than the leading scorer for the Kraken, which is kind of wild and is making me wonder if this is not like an outdated stat sheet that I'm looking at, because that does seem fully insane. I'm just going to pull up the numbers here real quick. Yeah, no, NHL.com has the same thing, like wild. So that's kind of my first point about Mason Marchment, is that yes, he's having a down year at the minute. I do think that is almost entirely based on the fact that a couple of reasons. One is that he's shooting at about 4% less than his career average. He shot at 16% his last go round with the Stars. He had back-to-back 22 goal seasons with the Dallas Stars as well. So there's no reason to think that there are goals in there. It's not like they've decided to go out and get a guy that is having like one good season. Like he's in his 4-ish full seasons in the NHL so far. He scored 22 goals twice, 18 goals once, and then 12 goals once. So again, like, there's goals in him. He's got 202 points in 331 career games, which is, a pretty good rate of scoring, especially for a guy that's undrafted. Now here are my issues with the trade, kind of in general. Actually, we'll take a quick break, I think, and then when we get back, what we'll do is we'll talk about my issues with the trade and kind of what that means for the Blue Jackets going forward in just a second. Here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. And that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And we all know that live betting is best when the game starts to shift, right? A receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, momentum starts to flip after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump right into that moment. Their live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Their player props update as guys are heating up, and you can bet next touchdown scorers, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. Honestly, this might be good news for Blue Jackets fans. If you want to put some money on the Blue Jackets, they go into the third period with a lead, maybe put some money on the other team winning. Either you get to watch the Blue Jackets win, or you get a little bit of money if you're right. So, it's a depressing win-win scenario. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com. You can place your NFL live bets all season long, or any other sport. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. I've talked about kind of the cautious optimism I think I have for this trade, and like the too long didn't read version of this is a pretty low risk, like, it's not great asset management, but also it's a second round pick and a fourth round pick, and the more I kind of look at this kind of stuff, the more I'm like, do I overvalue picks? And the answer is yes, maybe. And that might be just because of like the prospect work that I've done in the past or what. But the chances of a fourth round pick becoming an NHL player are like astronomically low. They've got like a 3% chance of playing 100 NHL games or something stupid like that. The second round pick kind of smart, but it's Minnesota's pick. If Minnesota does a decent job in the playoffs, which, there's a lot of heavy lifting there, but likely this pick is going to be somewhere in the realm of like 45 to 60-ish. And like, you're not going to get no value there, but you're certainly not going to get the value that you would get if that pick was, 35th overall or whatever. So basically I am fine with giving up those picks, especially because I think you would have given up more for a player like for other players. Now I want to talk a little bit about my worries about this, because again, like it has to be said, Mason Marchment having a down year right now. He's got 4 goals total this season. Now, admittedly, this still qualifies him for 9th on the team in scoring, or tied for 8th on the team in scoring. Actually, he's got the same number of points as Shane Wright. It would also put him 9th on the Blue Jackets in scoring, right? Like, he would have more points than Kent Johnson, more points than Mathieu Olivier, who admittedly has just missed like 11 games, more points than Igor Chinikov, etc., right? Like, I don't think that this trade is immediately, why would they go and get him, in the same vein that I was like, why would they go and get Miles Wood, right? Or whoever. This was unnecessary shade towards Miles Wood, who has been fine for the Blue Jackets. I guess my concern with this trade is I don't know what it does to move the needle on this team, right? The Blue Jackets are struggling right now. They can't seem to get out of their own way. They are struggling with scoring goals. They're struggling with not allowing goals. They are, struggling with a whole bunch of things. I don't know that Mason Marchment addresses many of these needs. especially because the Blue Jackets already have about 17 middle six players. And adding Mason Marchment to that is just going to like increase on that logjam, right? Like you already have Chinikov, who's ostensibly a middle six player, Kent Johnson, who should be on the second line and isn't. You've got Sillinger, you've got Jenner, you've got Olivier. They keep trying to make Isaac Lundestrom a middle six player. Like they've got a lot of bodies. Olivier, when he's healthy, and adding Mason Marchment to this group does, like, I don't know that it changes anything. I'll be interested to see where he fits in the lineup in terms of like who he's replacing. Because I do think that there is something there to like pair him with potentially Monahan and Chinikov. And I think that could be fun. My hope is that what doesn't happen is we get like a second line of Jenner, Monahan, Marchment. Because that to me is you're bumping scoring down the line. You're bumping offensive generation down the line. Like Kent Johnson is already on the fourth line. Like you'd have to think that the guys that are getting bumped out of the lineup for this are guys like Lundestrom, guys like Zach Aston Reese, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Mason Marchment bumps Kent Johnson out of the lineup entirely, but I don't know that Mason Marchment is not replacing guys like Boone Jenner in the middle six, right? Boone Jenner is going to continue to be a middle six player. What they're going to do is they're going to bring Mason Marchment in. He's going to bump other guys down the lineup, the young guys that have finally started showing some promise in the last kind of week or so. I know that the team is miserable right now, but like I thought Chinikov's looked really good for the last couple of games. Again, Kent Johnson was a net positive player, despite the fact that both of his line mates decided to do absolutely nothing in the game against the Wild. And he had, 4 points in 3 games previous to the Wild game. Like there's a lot. Like if Kent Johnson can slowly find his game again, like fast would be great, but if he can slowly find his game, like that's great. I don't know that bringing in a guy like Mason Marchment is going to create room for Kent Johnson to do that. I also don't know that he's going to be a fit in the system, right? Like he is a player that worked really well in Dallas, which is a very structured, very good transition team. Columbus has not been great at transition this season. And I don't know that he's going to fit into Everson's system in the way that other players, like Charlie Coyle, has obviously fitted in really well in the system. Miles Wood has also fitted in really well in the system. I don't know that Mason Marchment is going to fit in super well. Again, maybe he'll surprise me. And I'm not like I don't want this to sound like I'm basically setting the guy up to fail before he gets it. Because I do think that there is a lot of potential here. Again, if you can get the Mason Marchment that was in Dallas, great. I don't think you'll get that, but what would be nice if you could get something in between the Marchment in Seattle and the Marchment in Dallas, right? Like I would love a player that is like, I'm just going to pull up his point per game numbers if I can. I don't think I can on this page. That's fine. But like if you could get, there's 60 games left in the season? No, not even. There's less than 50 games in the season. It's too early to do math. Let's say 45 games of Mason Marchment. If you could get 30 points out of Mason Marchment in those 45 games, I would be pretty happy with that. Like if you can get maybe 15 goals out of Marchment, I think that's great. I think that's extremely possible. I think probably 10 to 12 is more likely, and I would be happy with 10 to 12 goals. Like 15 would be really kind of pushing the boat in terms of like, oh, this is great type thing. But I don't know where he's going to fit into the system. I don't know where he's going to fit into the lines. I don't know how he's going to gel with Everson. I know that Everson, he probably is the kind of player that Everson loves because he's big and is a veteran, and we all know how Dean Everson feels about his big veterans, right? Like, that's the other thing, is that Mason Marchment is enormous. I know that people have been clamoring for more size on the Blue Jackets, which is wild because they're not a particularly small team, I don't think. But Mason Marchment is coming in at like 6'5", 225 pounds, I think. So he adds a little bit of that. It does make me wonder if Olivier is out longer than I think anyone expected. I really don't know what's up with him because I thought it looked like a hip injury. And now, but then they're saying it's A, upper body, which I don't think a hip is an upper body. And B, the way that they talk about it makes me think that it's like a back thing or a head thing. Like, it sounds like a concussion. I don't think it is a concussion, but it's the sort of thing that apparently he has to take it slow in case he makes it worse. So I don't know what's going on with Olivier, but he hasn't started skating with the team yet. He skated by himself the last couple of days, I think, which is good news. Slowly working his way back. Like, next up, the team is in California right now, obviously, so we won't see him probably skate with the team until post-Christmas, or definitely won't. But he is potentially going to be out longer than I think they expect. So I wonder if they're bringing in a guy like Marchment to play that Olivier role until he gets back. I don't know. It's a weird trade because it feels like it's doing a lot and also doing nothing at the same time, right? I don't really. I'm not super optimistic about the trade. I'll say that. I think it could work out, and I would love to be wrong. And I don't think that it's a bad trade. I just don't know what it does to address a lot of the issues that the Blue Jackets have right now, right? Unless this is hey, I'm bringing in a guy to shuffle up the room, to shuffle up the lines a bit. In which case, sure, let's see what happens, right? Again, I really, really would love if Mason Marchment came in. And do you remember when they brought in Alex Nylander a few years ago and he scored like 12 goals in 15 games or something stupid to end the season? I would love if something like that happened. And again, this might be a wake-up call for some of the guys that are kind of on the bubble here. But I don't know what the ongoing plan is. Again, the worst case scenario here is that if you flip them at the deadline, they've picked up another UFA that they can use to kind of recoup some costs. So there's always that, right? Blue Jackets have not a ton of UFAs going into this season, but they've added one more that has some value, right? Like Charlie Coyle has value. I know that I would like to re-sign Coyle, contract dependent, but I also think he's a guy that if this season goes the way that we think it is, like, it might not be a bad thing to recoup some draft capital, right? Marchment, again, I think is a guy that has value. Jenner is a guy that has value. Probably you could get rid of Zach Aston-Reese if you wanted to. He's making basically nothing, and he feels like a great 13th forward for a playoff team. And then Erica Branson, I think, is legally dead now. And Brendan Smith is also a UFA. So, they don't have zero UFAs, but I think adding a guy like Marchment, who probably will have some value at the trade deadline, is also not, the worst idea in the world. Obviously, you shouldn't be picking up players in the hope that you can flip them in a couple of months' time. But if that is what happens, then we'll see if Don Waddell can get more than a second and a fourth in return for Mason Marchment. I don't think so, but at the very least, the hope is that you come out net zero, right? Of you get a couple of picks back, whether that's a second and a fourth, whether that's just a straight up third, I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. That's kind of what I've got. We went a little bit long, but that's fine. There's going to be a game preview going up in a couple of hours, probably. The Blue Jackets are on the West Coast right now, so we have some time there. They don't play until 3 a.m. my time, which is fine. I feel fine about it. But in a couple hours, there's going to be a preview for the Ducks game coming up. Hopefully, by the time I record that, we'll know whether or not Marchment's going to be in the lineup, so we can talk a little bit about that. Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets over on Twitter. And I think that's about it for my outro. Sign up for the Everydayers Club if you haven't already. It's $5 a month. You get ad-free episodes. You get access to the exclusive Discord. You get a bunch of stuff, which is fun. Like I said, $5 a month. LockedOnBlueJackets.supercast.com. I'll be back in a couple hours with a preview for tonight's game. But until then, make sure you stay locked on.